My name's Adam, and I'm 29 years old. If you asked anyone in my family who the quiet one is, they'd point to me. I'm not the type to shout at dinner or compete for the spotlight. I don't stir the pot. I listen more than I speak. I don't throw tantrums, even when I probably should. That's just never been my style. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that people like that, the quiet ones, tend to get underestimated. And sometimes, we're the ones who remember everything. My brother Nate is 2 years younger than me, and growing up, our dynamic was exactly what you'd expect between two boys close in age. Chaotic but close. We shared a room until I went to college, got into our fair share of backyard brawls, and covered for each other when things went sideways with our parents. But things changed after college. Nate got into sales and leaned hard into the image. Tailored suits, a leased BMW, and a social media feed full of gym selfies and motivational quotes he didn't live by. I stayed low-key, got my engineering degree, moved to a quieter city, built a solid life I didn't feel the need to post about. We still talked, but something was always off. Like I was only kept around out of obligation, not affection. When he got engaged to Brianna, a woman I had met exactly twice, I was genuinely happy for him. Even if she seemed like the kind of person who said things like, "We're just very curated as a couple," and acted like my job designing structural components for wind turbines was somehow less impressive than Nate selling luxury mattresses. I tried. I really did. I RSVP'd the same day I got the invite, offered to help with any tech or venue setup, was politely brushed off, and even Venmo'd $200 toward the joint bachelor-bachelorette weekend I wasn't invited to. The wedding was in a vineyard an hour outside the city. Rustic but overpriced, very on brand. I'd rented a suit, gotten a hotel room nearby, and brought a thoughtful gift, a card with a check for $1,500. It wasn't just generous, it was meaningful. That money wasn't pocket change for me. I had saved it slowly, wanting to contribute something significant because I genuinely believed this was supposed to be a big moment for my brother. I was nervous driving up, not because of the event, but because something in my gut told me this day wouldn't go smoothly. When I arrived at the venue, I saw the seating chart posted on a small easel by the entrance. I scanned it for my name. First time through, nothing. I looked again, then again. My name wasn't on it. Assuming it was an oversight, I headed inside and approached one of the wedding planners, a younger woman juggling clipboards and a walkie-talkie. "Hi, sorry," I said gently. "I don't think I see my name on the chart for one of the events." She glanced at me, clearly already exhausted, then flipped through her guest list. "Adam. Oh, you're Nate's brother, right?" Her tone changed, like she realized something awkward. "Yeah, so, there were some last-minute shifts. I think you're supposed to be over by the west wall. There's a few open seats near the photo booth." The west wall. I blinked. That wasn't even at a table. It was near the speakers, where the extra folding chairs had been stacked like an afterthought. Still thinking it had to be a mistake, I made my way over. That's when I noticed it. The only labeled seat that should have been mine had a place card, but not with my name. It said, "Tiffany, Cousins +1." I didn't even know who Tiffany was. But there she was, already sipping champagne in the seat I'd assumed was mine, laughing with a group of people I barely recognized. Trying to keep calm, I walked toward my mom, who was adjusting the boutonniere on my dad's jacket. "Hey," I said, trying to keep it casual, "do you know what's going on with the seating?" She didn't even look up. "Oh, yeah. Brianna's family had more people show up than expected, and they're all flying in from so far. We didn't want to move them. Just hang near the wall for the ceremony. You'll still see everything." "The wall," I echoed, a little too loudly. My dad gave me a look like I was making a scene. "It's not a big deal," my mom said, brushing me off with a wave. "Just don't ruin the pictures by sulking." I wasn't sulking. I was stunned. And then came the final twist of the knife, Brianna's voice, bright and sharp behind me. "Oh good, you found a spot," she said, not even waiting for a response. "We're just trying to keep the family photos looking clean, you know?" I don't know what my face looked like, but it must have said everything I was trying not to. Because she added quickly, "It's nothing personal. You'll still be in the reception shots, I promise." I nodded, tight-lipped. She walked off with her bridal posse in tow. There's a kind of humiliation that doesn't come with yelling or tears, just a slow, hollow ache in your chest as you realize you're not welcome somewhere you should have been. I stood there for a minute, trying to swallow it down. But then my eyes drifted across the room, to the gift table. A white linen-covered surface near the cake, loaded with pastel-wrapped boxes and fancy envelopes. Mine was easy to spot. Matte silver, hand addressed, tucked neatly under a thin ribbon. I had sealed that envelope with so much care, even tucked in a note about how proud I was of Nate, how I hoped the money would help start his next chapter. I didn't even think. I walked straight over, reached down, and calmly took it back. No one stopped me. No one even noticed at first. Until I turned toward the door, and someone, maybe one of the groomsmen, called out, "Hey, Adam, where are you going?" I didn't pause. I just looked over my shoulder, held the envelope up, and said, "Don't worry, I'll stay out of the frame forever." I was almost at the exit when I heard Nate's voice behind me. "Adam, wait." I stopped walking, but I didn't turn around. I stood there, right by the large double doors that led out to the gravel parking lot, one hand on the polished brass handle and the other gripping the envelope like it was the only solid thing keeping me grounded. "Adam," Nate said again, closer now, his shoes crunching softly on the floor behind me. "Come on, man, don't do this. It's not that deep." I turned slowly, and for the first time in years, I really looked at him. He was standing there in his designer tux, boutonniere slightly askew, champagne still fizzing in a glass in his left hand. He looked confused, like I was the one making a scene. Like he hadn't just relegated his own brother to a folding chair near the photo booth because Brianna's cousin brought an extra guest. "Not that deep?" I repeated, quietly. "Yeah," he said with a shrug, lowering his voice a little like he didn't want the other guests to hear. "It's just the seating, bro. It's not like we kicked you out. And Brianna's family, man, they flew in from, like, Portugal. We had to make room." I let out a short laugh, but it wasn't funny. "So I get to sit in a corner and hope no one asks if I'm the DJ? Dude, don't be dramatic. It's one day. You seriously gonna make this about you?" That one hit. Make this about me. I had spent years showing up for birthdays, holidays, family cookouts, always the one to send cards, to remember anniversaries, to stay late and help clean up while Nate disappeared to take a call. I never made anything about me, and maybe that was the problem. Maybe they all got so used to me not taking up space that the idea of me needing a chair, a single, literal chair, was suddenly too much. "I flew out," I said slowly. "I rented a hotel. I bought a suit. I gave you $1,500. We're giving," he corrected, pointing at the envelope. "Right?" I said. "Was. But then I realized something. I'm not really your brother today. I'm just background." His jaw clenched. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "No," I said. "You already did. You just didn't think I'd notice." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "Look, it was Brianna's call, okay? She wanted the photos to be all her close circle. Clean lines, matching colors. That kind of thing. So I didn't match?" I asked. "Did she run a background check on who had photogenic bone structure?" He didn't answer that. And maybe he knew better than to try. "You know," I said, finally walking back toward him, "I didn't expect a spotlight. I didn't even expect a toast or a dance or a shout-out. I just expected a seat. A place. Somewhere that said, 'You matter enough to be here like everyone else.'" "You do matter," he muttered, almost like it hurt to say. "Then why didn't you act like it?" His eyes flicked past me to the rest of the room, the guests who were now watching more openly, the photographer who was pausing mid-shot, the DJ lowering the volume slightly. He hated this kind of attention. I could see it all over his face. He'd wanted the day to be perfect, curated, Instagrammable. And now it wasn't. Not because I threw a tantrum, but because I refused to disappear quietly. "Look," he said through gritted teeth, "if this is about money." "It's not," I cut in. "It's about respect. And today showed me how little I have from you." He opened his mouth like he was going to protest, but nothing came out. Just a frustrated exhale. "I'm leaving," I said, adjusting the envelope in my hand. "But don't worry, I'll make sure the photos are perfect. No awkward older brother in the background to mess up the symmetry." I walked out before he could respond. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I made my way to my car. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just sat behind the wheel for a moment, watching the vineyard fade into the distance through the rearview mirror. It was surreal. Like I'd just stepped out of a movie where I wasn't cast as a main character, not even a supporting role. Just an extra who wandered too close to the shot. Back at the hotel, I changed out of the suit, packed my bag, and opened the envelope I had reclaimed. I pulled out the note I'd written, the one about being proud of him, about hoping the money helped them start a new chapter. I read it once, then tore it cleanly in half. Then I turned off my phone. It didn't stay off for long. About an hour later, when I powered it back on, I had 6 missed calls from Nate, from my mom, and a string of increasingly anxious texts. The last one was from Brianna. All it said was, You really ruined everything today. And that was the moment the guilt stopped. That sentence, the way she framed it, like I had wrecked their carefully filtered little fantasy, made something in me finally click into place. I hadn't ruined anything. I had exposed it. But that wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel before sunrise. The front desk clerk barely looked up when I dropped off my key card, which was fine, because I wasn't in the mood for small talk. I grabbed a stale croissant from the breakfast bar, tossed it in my passenger seat, and drove out of the vineyard town like it owed me money. By the time I got back to my apartment, I'd racked up 11 more missed calls and 2 voicemails I had zero interest in hearing. My mom's text had shifted tone entirely from "you shouldn't have walked out" to "please call your brother, he's devastated," to the one that actually made me laugh. Family means sometimes making sacrifices. Adam. Sacrifices. I sat down on my couch, still in my jeans from the night before, rereading that sentence. It sounded like something ripped from a refrigerator magnet at a gas station gift shop. What exactly had Nate sacrificed? His wedding photos were still going to be on brand. His bride was still going to post them with captions like "blessed" and "our fairy tale begins." He'd still get the curated experience he wanted, minus one sibling who apparently clashed with the color palette. And here's the thing. I'd already made the sacrifices. They just never noticed. For the past year and a half, I'd been quietly helping Nate out with his startup, a mattress import business that was, frankly, bleeding money. It wasn't public knowledge, but back when he first launched it, he called me in a panic because he needed someone to co-sign a loan. Not for a house, not for a car, for a warehouse space and inventory contract. I didn't ask for anything in return. I figured, he's my brother. If he succeeds, we all win. If he fails, at least he tried. And yeah, maybe part of me hoped that helping him now would finally be seen as something more than just Adam being dependable. I never told our parents about it. I didn't even tell my friends. It was just something I quietly managed. I made sure the payments were on time, fielded a few calls from the bank when things got tight, and even wired him an emergency $3,000 last fall when his supplier nearly pulled out. All of it without a thank you longer than a one-line text. Appreciate it, bro. That check I'd reclaimed from the gift table? That wasn't just a wedding gift. It was me finally drawing the line. But now, sitting there in my apartment surrounded by unopened mail and half-wilted plants, I realized something deeper. They didn't just forget my seat at the wedding. They had forgotten my role entirely. So I got to work. First, I opened my files, every email thread, every signed document, every bank statement tied to the loan. I was still the co-signer, which meant I still had administrative access. The loan wasn't fully paid down, not even close. And while I hadn't made any legal claims to the business, I had leverage. I didn't want to destroy him. I really didn't. But something about Brianna's text, "You really ruined everything today," echoed in my head like a dare. As if their perfect little world couldn't handle 1 ounce of reality. As if my silent support for the past 18 months was less important than how I'd look in the background of their Instagram carousel. I drafted an email. Simple, clean, legally sound. It notified the bank that, due to personal and financial reasons, I was formally withdrawing as co-signer and no longer authorizing any further use of my credit or identity in business operations. I attached the proper forms, copied Nate's email, and clicked send. Then, for good measure, I forwarded a few key documents to a lawyer friend of mine from college, just in case things got messy. Not because I expected a fight, but because Nate was impulsive and Brianna? Let's just say I didn't trust someone who referred to wedding centerpieces as branding assets. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. This time it was Nate. I answered. His voice was clipped. Tense. "Did you just pull out of the loan?" "Yes." "Why?" "Now. You're getting married," I said flatly. "Time to stand on your own." There was a pause. "Adam, come on. This is not the time to be petty." I could hear it, the frustration he was trying to keep in check, the tone of someone who still believed he was the reasonable one in the conversation. That I was just overreacting. That it would all blow over like one of his many overdue invoices. "This isn't petty," I said. "It's overdue. You're seriously doing this because of a chair?" "No," I said, leaning back. "Because of a pattern. And a chair was just the final straw." He exhaled sharply. Okay, let's talk. Come over. We'll figure something out." "You mean like how you figured out where to seat me? Or how to tell everyone I didn't matter enough for the photos? Or how to let your new wife treat me like an inconvenience?" Silence. You didn't even ask if I was okay when I left, I added. You didn't check on me. You called because now there's something you want from me. Still silence. Then, more quietly, so, is this like permanent? You're just done. I don't know yet, I said honestly. That depends on you. And then I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel smug. I felt tired. Like I just finished cleaning up a mess that wasn't mine but had been left for me all the same. A mess that had been building for years in the unspoken slights, the shrugged-off moments, the quiet betrayals no one ever thought I noticed. What I didn't know yet was that Nate wasn't the only one rattled by what I'd done. The ripple effect had already started. Brianna's father, a quiet investor in Nate's business, had questions. My mother was now organizing a family mediation dinner, and my inbox was about to light up with messages from cousins who, it turned out, had also been snubbed by Brianna's guest list adjustments. But I'll get to that part soon, because the moment that truly shifted everything, the one where things went from awkward family drama to full-blown fracture, that came 3 days later. I got a Facebook message from my cousin Melissa. We weren't especially close, but we'd grown up around the same chaotic holiday dinners and shared more than a few eye rolls over the years. Her message was short. Hey, just wondering, were you also asked not to be in the family photos? That word also stopped me cold. We hopped on a call that night. Melissa had been seated at the farthest table, near the portable heaters. Her husband didn't even get a place card. Brianna, apparently, had sent an updated guest flow to the wedding coordinator 2 nights before the event, reshuffling seating to optimize the aesthetic. Translation: anyone over 30, under-photogenic, or not TikTok presentable got pushed to the fringes. And it wasn't just Melissa. She'd already spoken to 2 other cousins, one who had driven 6 hours and wasn't even offered a drink, and another who brought a $400 espresso machine off their registry only to be seated behind a hedge. The more she dug, the more she found. Half the Reynolds side of the guest list had been sidelined in favor of Brianna's influencer circle, distant relatives from her mom's Pilates class, and people who fit the vibe. The wedding wasn't a celebration, it was a photo shoot with vows. Melissa ended the call with, I don't think I'm being dramatic, but this really feels like they used us as fillers. Background extras. Like they were embarrassed to actually have family there. I told her she wasn't being dramatic at all. Later that night, I got curious. I clicked over to Brianna's Instagram. Sure enough, the photos had started rolling in perfectly filtered snapshots of rustic charm and candid laughs. Nate looked like an ad for cologne. Brianna looked like a bridal influencer on a sponsored post. The captions were as hollow as I expected. The day our forever began. I scrolled and scrolled. Dozens of photos. Not a single one featured a member of our family. Not even our parents. Not even Nate's best man, who, I found out later, was one of his old coworkers and not his actual best friend, because apparently he didn't fit the look. It hit me then. This wasn't just about me being disrespected. This was about the entire family being repackaged to fit a brand. And they thought none of us would say anything. The next morning, I called my parents. Mom answered on speaker, which meant Dad was hovering nearby. I kept it civil. I asked how they were doing, whether they got back okay, how the rest of the reception went. They were guarded, polite, but cautious. I could tell they weren't sure where I stood. Finally, Mom sighed and said, Adam, I wish you hadn't left like that. You embarrassed your brother. I waited a beat. Did he tell you where I was seated? There was a pause. I think there was a mix-up. You should have spoken up. Quietly. So it would have looked better on camera? I asked, not hiding the bite. She didn't answer that. I'm not angry, I said calmly. I'm just done pretending I wasn't treated like an afterthought. And apparently, I wasn't the only one. That got their attention. I told them about Melissa, about the cousins, about the people who were quietly simmering behind the scenes, all of them too polite to cause a scene, but not too blind to see what had happened. Dad finally spoke. He said Brianna organized most of it. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. And Nate let her. That's the part no one's saying. Mom tried to defend him. Said weddings are stressful, that couples make mistakes, that maybe they'd make it up to me later. They won't, I said flatly. Because they don't think they did anything wrong. And that's when I told them about the loan. The silence on the other end was immediate and total. I gave it a second to sink in. You what? Dad finally asked. I co-signed the loan for Nate's warehouse lease, I said. 18 months ago. I've been covering the payments he couldn't. No one knew because I didn't make it a thing. I just did it. Quietly. Like I always do. Mom's voice cracked. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought I was helping, I said. Because I thought that's what family did. I let the silence hang again. Anyway, I continued. I pulled out. I notified the bank. Nate's on his own now. Dad cleared his throat. He said you're trying to sabotage him. No, I said. I just stopped protecting him. Later that day, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Mr. Galen, Brianna's father. His tone was icy but polite. He asked if I could clarify some sudden changes in loan agreements that had come to his attention. I explained the situation, my former involvement, my formal withdrawal, and the fact that I was under no legal obligation to continue supporting a business that had excluded me financially and personally from day one. I understand, he said, after a long pause. I just wish you'd spoken to me first. I wish a lot of things were done differently, I replied. The next 48 hours were a blur. The fallout spread fast. Nate called 3 more times. Left voicemails, none of which I answered. One was furious, the next apologetic, the third a mess of half-excuses and forced chuckles. He said Brianna was super upset, and everyone's being dramatic, and can't we just hit reset? But I didn't want to reset. I wanted closure. That Friday, I got an invitation, not to another wedding, thankfully, but to a brunch organized by Melissa. A bunch of cousins and second cousins were planning a low-key get-together, partly to decompress and partly to quietly acknowledge that something had broken between us and Nate. It was casual. Just coffee, waffles, and people who actually wanted to see each other. No staged photos. No filters. No hierarchy of who looked good on camera. We swapped stories. Laughed about the absurdity. Cried a little, too, especially the cousin who had paid for her flight on a credit card just to support family. And near the end, Melissa looked at me and said, "Thank you for walking out. We were all thinking it. You just had the guts to do it." That stuck with me. It would have been easier to stay quiet. To sit in my little folding chair near the wall and smile politely for the camera. But instead, I stood up, not for drama, not for revenge, but because I finally knew my worth. And I wasn't going to let them crop me out of it. 3 weeks later, Nate sent a handwritten letter. I still have it, tucked in the drawer with the ripped-up note I once included with that $1,500 check. The letter was a mix of regret, frustration, and vague attempts at reconciliation. He never actually said the words, "I'm sorry." But he did write this. "I thought keeping the peace meant avoiding conflict. I see now it really meant ignoring you. I was wrong. I haven't responded. Maybe I will one day. Maybe I won't. But I know this. I'm no longer the background brother. I'm not a placeholder, or a fallback, or a chair by the wall. I'm Adam. And I finally chose myself. And this time, I stayed in the frame.